I am Kim Clark, your host for Communicate Like You Give a Damn, which was a podcast title that came to me when I was on a drive. And I got home and my girlfriend has this sign in the kitchen and it said, "Eat like you give a damn." And I said, that would be a great title for a podcast. And so here we are. And this episode features someone who I really admire, who we have been able to have the opportunity to work together on a couple of webinars, providing more education and support for communicators. We both have this love for communications, and our guest skill set goes far beyond just communications and PR. So we're going to get into it. So ladies and gentlemen, and everyone on and off the spectrum, this is Dr. Ariel Ellis. And Ariel, thank you for letting me call you that. I appreciate. I wanted to make sure that we clarified because I want to honor your titles. We haven't caught up in a while. We were just now catching up, and I'm so glad. And I need to tell you, I miss you. Like, I really enjoyed working on those things that we did together, and I missed you at PRSA in Nashville in October of 2023. And I'm bummed about that, but I got to see you on stage, and I'm like, I'm looking around, everyone's sitting next to me, and I'm like, I know her. And you're killing it up there. And so and that prompted me. I'm just like, I think this would be a great opportunity for us to not only, reconnect and work together on something again, but here we are serving communicators one more time, and this time in a podcast fashion. So thank you for your yes. Thank you for coming on. And I'm really glad that we get to have this conversation. And it's an interesting social context that we're in right now that we're having this conversation, because it was different the last time we worked together. But with that, please introduce yourself so people can get to know a little bit more about you.
Excellent. Well, first of all, thank you, Kim. I love you. I admire you. And I always enjoy working with you. And it has been a while, so I miss you as well. And I missed you in Nashville. But I'm Dr. Ariel Ellis. I serve as Managing Principal of Advisory 83. We're a communication consultancy focused on DEI in the areas of strategic planning, executive coaching, and training and education. I'm a Memphis, Tennessee native, Tennessee State University grad. I'm a fourth generation HBCU graduate, proud HBCU graduate. And then I left, of course, my hometown of Memphis, went to Nashville, attend Tennessee State, got my bachelor's in journalism there. And I just was actually telling a story recently that there was a professor at the university was taking a PR class as an elective. There was not a PR major. And she pulled me to the side of the class one day and said, "Hey, Ariel, I think you really need to look into PR. You were really good at this. You know how to problem solve. You know how to communicate. You know how to write. I really think you should consider PR as a career." So got a master's, realized all I needed was a master's to teach because I wanted to run a business. I wanted to run my own PR firm. So I launched my PR firm a month after graduating college. I didn't have any business experience. I just said, I want to do that. And I will say, and now I know, this is year 20 for me as an entrepreneur. I'll be celebrating that anniversary in June with a new book. But I now know what we know. I didn't know this as a young college student, that in the multiple rounds of job interviews I went on as a college student, with a ton of experience, even as a college student, I was often told I was overqualified. I was often told I wasn't the best fit for the organization. And I know what that language means now, right? But that's what prompted me into entrepreneurship, like many Black women. It's those challenges of like being seen as a fit that propel us into entrepreneurship. So the work that we have been able to connect over recently has been the work of DEI, where I transitioned from PR about 8 or 9 years ago into DEI, really as a result of my peers in the PR industry saying, "Ariel, I need your help." My chief communication officer is asking me to write a DEI statement, and I think it's BS, and I don't know what to do. Or Ariel, I can't get my millennials and my baby boomers talking. They seem to butt heads. I need a communication plan, but I needed to live in the DEI, work that we do at the company, and can you help us with that? And oh, can you do some coaching with the millennials too and help them be good leaders? So that's what propelled me into the DEI space about 8 or 9 years ago, and got a certification in DEI and a certification in executive coaching, and that's been my world. And I get a chance to teach what I do and do what I teach. So after spending 10 years at Lipscomb University, a private Christian institution in Nashville, I am now the Wells Fargo Endowed Chair, Distinguished Professor at one of our beloved HBCUs, North Carolina Central University in Durham, North Carolina. And I'm teaching public relations.
It all comes around, right?
But
on PR. It's just like they're going to be looking at PR in a way that's not going to reaffirm the traditional cycle and statutes that, other universities may be spitting students out in, detract, just, in all the D's, that actually don't work anymore, which is what we're trying to help communicators unlearn.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm so glad that you are touching the college group right now, the whole demographic. And there's a lot of things in your intro I kind of want to follow up here on. First of all, a book. You got a book coming out? Is there anything you can tell us about it?
Not quite, but it will be about entrepreneurship and just my journey as a young entrepreneur, fresh out of college, and what that journey has been like for me these 20 years, and all the lessons that I've learned, how to make them applicable for those who are, leaning into that space or want to lean into the space, but want to take the leap. I'm on business number 5 at this point, or I've started 5 businesses, and I'm operating one of them primarily right now, and then preparing for one of them to bring in partners. So we're really excited about a relaunch about that. And I also have some books that I've written, particularly in my spare time, which it seems like I probably don't have much of, but I actually do. I like my life, and I like having great balance and freedom. So I get a chance to create content in the spiritual space as well. And so I get a chance to create content that really helps folks think about their lives in a holistic way. So I'm really excited about some of that content. So that's one book. The Original Millennial was my first book, and so I'm excited about the second edition of that I'm working on to be released in 2025. The Original Millennial was focused on 6 lessons of leadership that millennials need to master in business and community. And that was written in 2015 when I happened to run across a stat that 75% of leaders in the workplace will be from the millennial generation by the year 2025. And so we're working on a second edition of that as kind of the culmination of the 10 years, and being able to circle back on all the lessons and all the things that we've learned since then about the millennial generation, and what are those new lessons that the generation needs to pay attention to now. So really excited about the content that I'm working on.
Okay, so you said that you're on business 5. So we know that you did PR. We know that you do executive coaching. Mm-hmm. What are some of the other skill sets that you bring through your businesses and for your clients?
Yes, listen, business 5. What's interesting with the work that I'm doing with my primary business, which is consulting in the DEI space and executive coaching, with, of course, undergirded with a lot of leadership and comms work, is that I noticed that there's a gap, if you will, around the insights from a research perspective in looking at communities of color. And so in 2019, I had a dream, if you will, to kind of separate. Every once in a while, we would have a client that needed some market research, right, through the work that we were doing with Advisor 83 on the consulting side. So there's always some research whenever you're doing cultural assessments, whenever you're doing strategic planning. Of course, we know on the PR comms world, we're looking at the ROPE model. That's what I teach my students: ROPE, research, objectives, planning and promotion, and then evaluation, right? And so in teaching that model, I was doing a lot of that with the clients as well. But I would also always notice that if we didn't do the research, sometimes the research had a lot of holes and it was very kind of shoddy, particularly as it related to the insights around communities of color. And in my doctoral work and my dissertation, I did a deep dive into intercultural competency, particularly the intercultural competencies that senior leaders in public relations and communication needed if they were going to practice DEI effectively. So just started noticing a bunch of gaps. So decided that, there needs to be, if it doesn't already exist, and even if it does, doesn't matter, we're going to launch it anyway. There needs to be some conversation around the gap in consumer insights for communities of color, particularly as it relates to consumer engagement and civic engagement. Where's the
Mm.
line here? And what we saw was missing was three things: a focus on data analysis, a focus on data storytelling with communities of color in mind, and data education. We know we've seen so many years where communities of color, particularly African Americans and those of Latino and Hispanic descent, where there's a distrust of what are you going to do with my information, right? I do not want to tell you my story. Or I do not want to tell you, give you my information because you may harm me. If we go back to Henrietta Lacks and the story of her and her cells, literally, were studied without permission and without regard for her humanity. And so we go back to the Tuskegee experiment, all those things, and we see how even if we go to Japanese internments, stop me, Kim, I can go now.
I know there's so many examples.
There's so many examples of communities of color and their data, their stories being missed, their data being damaged, their information, right? Their identity being stripped because their information is not being handled with care and with respect and honor. So I launched a company called My Village Votes, which again focuses on the mere fact that communities of color not just vote in the ballot, but they vote in the bank. They vote when they pick up their phones and go to Instagram, right? They vote when they decide where they're going to eat and where they're going to spend their money. They vote when they watch certain shows on Netflix. That their vote is more than just currency. It is cultural capital, right? And so we launched My Village Votes, and I'm excited to bring on, and of course, in the height of COVID and the death of George Floyd, we didn't spend a lot of time like cultivating that relationship because the demand at that, or cultivating the work in that company, because all the consulting and all the DEI needs that we were doing in Advisor 83 took over. So I'm grateful now to say that I'm able to bring on two partners, also phenomenal Black female educators and consultants who are educated at the doctoral level, as am I. And so we'll be relaunching My Village Votes very, very soon. So those are some of the entrepreneurial pursuits that I've been involved in. And even now, Kim, just making sure with My Village Votes, with Advisor 83 and some of the other things that I'm kind of, putting my hands into, making sure that these are not just businesses, but they're social enterprises, and that they really impact people who have either been underrepresented or just overlooked in a sense, where those stories are being told and they're being serviced properly.
Incredible. See, there's so much more, so much more work and impact that you're having in the world than what I knew when we originally started working together. I could see the thread, and it all comes together. And I just thank you for doing the work. Thank you for that. And one of the things I noticed when I was researching you was that you did over 100 trainings in 2020, at least, something like that, after George Floyd was murdered. And now we're about 4 years later from that time period. And you mentioned being in business for over 20 years now, or coming up on 20 years. And so I would love your insight to help people understand kind of the ebbs and flows of this work. Where were people at? How would you describe where people were at in the summer of 2020 and to where we are when we're recording in 2024?
Wow. That's a great question. I'll actually give a little bit of where I think folks were pre George Floyd. So I had about a 4 or 5 year span of transitioning into D&I, and as I said earlier, my PR colleagues or peers rather, people trust me, right? I'm grateful to have. I think that's one of my gifts is I'm people know they can trust me, and sometimes they trust me a little too much, and they tell me, all the things, and when my colleagues or my peers, I should say peers from the industry, whether it be PRSA or just years of knowing people and working with people, would come to me and ask me, what do I do about this? How can you help me? How do I handle this? I don't know much about diversity and inclusion. At that point, they were just saying diversity and inclusion, D and I versus DE and I, because of course, we know the acronym has evolved. And so pre-COVID, the demand of DEI felt healthy. It felt manageable. It felt like you could push the envelope some, and you had enough studies and proof and results to where companies, okay, like, yeah, we need to give this a shot, open-minded, and wanting to have conversations. But then when George Floyd died, unfortunately, everybody had something to say. Everybody wanted to find something to say. I think it wasn't even so much that they had something to say, they wanted to find something to say. And there was a demand on companies having something to say. But I think there now we see the aftermath of that in how the reactionary measures that many organizations were taking did not have the sustainability to undergird doing real work. So my company grew or increased revenue by 300% in 2020, by the end of 2020. And I was, by mid 2021, we had produced over 100 trainings. And we would even have one particular client, or a series of clients where we did a series of trainings for. So it may have been one client, and we did 12 to 15 trainings for that one client. And me and my team were exhausted. Not to mention, Kim, not only were we doing trainings, as I said earlier, I'm a certified executive coach. And the way I transitioned into DEI was coaching millennials. And as a result of that demographic being one of the largest to date, a lot of the work that my contracts or whatever will be attached to would be through a DEI budget, right? And they would put it on the professional development line or the training education line. So not only would I get asked to come in and do coaching and strategy with millennials and senior leaders on how to interact with their millennials, I also would get asked pre-COVID, do you also do unconscious bias and intercultural comms and things of that nature? So that's really the expansion. But when COVID hit and George Floyd passed away, all the I had read a ton of curriculum, right? Ton of trainings. I had no idea. None of us knew what was going to happen with COVID. And we definitely didn't expect what was happening with George Floyd to really change the world the way that it did. So it just so happened that me and my team had written these trainings and written these curricula. And the moment he died, and the moment it hit global airwaves, our phone rang off the hook. But to answer your question, I think what I see now is what we know. We know that while some organizations were well equipped to continue the work, there were others who were ill equipped to continue the work, no matter how much they had a you or a me embedded in their culture as a partner. And I think what has happened with that is not only, you know, you know how I'm a music person, right? So you know how like you have a favorite artist, but your favorite artist isn't like a A-lister.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and but everybody knows that loves this artist knows that they're one of like the best singer or the best saxophone player or whatever. I feel like that's what happened with DEI. And that the moment that people start to hear about it, then that art gets to be critiqued. I think there's a critique. I think DEI, just like communication, it's an art and it's a science. And the moment folks know that this is a vulnerable piece of work, this is a vulnerable effort because it requires people to be transparent. It requires people to come naked. It requires people to, rid themselves of their biases, but admit them first. I think the combination and the collective of all of that puts the practice of DEI out in front for this full on worldwide critique, to the extent where we see what we're seeing now with the defunding and the states pulling DEI curriculum and how from their universities, and then taking DEI staff and letting go of those positions, not just on the state funded schools, but of course, as we know, on the corporate side as well. So I think people are just like we were vulnerable at the time that George Floyd died. We and the folks who are DEI detractors are even as more vulnerable because we've had to have some conversations that we don't want to have. And we've had to deal with broken systems in ways that we don't want to deal with them. So, what's the best way to address something that you don't want to deal with? Get rid of it. And I think that's what is happening.
Well, you've probably seen ebbs and flows in the 20 years of being a part of this work. What is the role of communicators right now? Like the role of storytelling, narrative, using the term DEI or not? Like, what is our role to step up in this kind of time, especially in a year like 2024 year, where it just feels chaotic and out of control?
Yeah, it does feel chaotic and it does feel out of control. And also, with the chaos, with the out of control, is the misinformation and the disinformation, particularly of stories of those from vulnerable populations, right? And I think that's why it's important for all of us to own our stories, no matter who you are, owning your story. I'm working on an article. I'm going to tease it with the listener, you and the listeners. This is an exclusive.
Okay.
I think I've been playing with this idea of how communicators can really. You've written the books, right? You've done the work on, and we all know kind of the Dr. Brene Brown platform and frameworks around bravery, right? And I think it's really important to look at what that means, because the detractors aren't necessarily going anywhere. The reality is the good that needs to be done in this space, whether you, as you said, whether you call it DEI or not, the good is not going to stop. The good is going to continue. The good may be being overshadowed at the moment, but it doesn't mean the work is not getting done. And I think communicators are going to have to, all of us, but particularly communicators, I think communicators are going to have to really lean into what it means to be real leaders and what it means to identify from a very sophisticated, right, lens, what it means to really step forward. And so I've been playing with these things. So one, I think, is for communicators, how to address the denial when it comes to the shift that we're in, when it comes to cultural shifts, when it comes to dealing with diverse communities, when it comes to recognizing that our stories are what they are, our realities are what they are. We have to acknowledge and confront, continue to do so, the existence of systematic biases and inequalities. But you can't deny that if you haven't done your homework. So I still see so many people who just have not done their homework. They've not read the books. They've not watched the documentaries. They've not had the one-on-one conversations with people who are different than them, right? And not just
Mm-hmm.
different by skin color or gender identity or religion even, because even those things you can still find some similarities that aren't really thought provoking enough to shift your view or to open up your mind. So I think communicators being able to deal with knowing how to address the denial that systematic barriers and biases and inequalities are a thing. There's still quite a few people, many people who not only not only don't know that denial exists, they don't want to even, they're in denial that denial is a thing, right?
Yes.
So I think the next one, and I'm playing on some alliteration here with the letter D, decision making. I think communicators are going to have to continue to be bold with their decision making. Going to have to continue to encourage the decision makers inside of their organizations to be bold, while also realizing that decisions going forward, if they haven't been already, need to be very inclusive and considerate of all diverse perspectives, right? I always like to say when I'm doing trainings or even doing coaching, I like to talk about how important not only transparency is and active listening is, but just making sure that people feel psychologically safe, right? You're not going
Mm-hmm.
to collect those diverse perspectives if people don't feel psychologically safe to tell you what they think and how they feel and what they've experienced and what that experience meant to them and what it did to them. I also think the other D that I've kind of been mixing and matching with is differences. And thinking through, we try to, Kim, as a society, we try to play this game like we are just so comfortable with everybody's differences, and we aren't. We're just not. And I think the more that we can be honest about that, and communicators can champion that honesty and say, we say we like differences, but we're really uncomfortable with differences. How can we use communication even to build strategy to make us a little bit more comfortable with differences, right? So I think that's important. I am amazed at how often we we throw out the messaging and the lines that we are embracing diversity as a strength, and we actively are working to understand and celebrate differences, um, when policies, procedures, and even language and messaging doesn't prove that to be true. So I think we need to lean into that more, not only as communicators, but also culturally, how we show up in society. The next thing I would say, again, I'm playing with this little framework. So again, it's an exclusive. I think dialogues are critical. We
Mm-hmm.
as communicators have to champion what it means to really have like honest dialogues, not just about DEI, but what we see happening in our world, whether you agree or disagree. We always talk about you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. I don't think that's ever going to change for us, especially in a society. As I talked about misinformation and disinformation. We got to have some real, true conversations. We got to keep having what we've all heard in the DEI space, courageous conversations, and then determine what kind of actions follow those conversations. I mean, just as a Black woman, I know, even in the DEI space and executive coaching, like in the communication too, we talk about, we're tired of talking, we want to see action. Well, the dialogue is what starts it all. Communication starts it all. So I think, being not being afraid to push the envelope when it comes to these open and honest dialogues is going to be critical. And then the last little iteration that I've been playing with is discovery. Um,
Mm-hmm.
this is Kim, this is hard work.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? This is hard
Mm-hmm.
work. It's hard work,
I was
but
about to
it's
say
hard.
HRD and HEART. Yes.
Yes, it is hard work, but for all of us to do. But those of us who do it, particularly strategists, practitioners, communicators, coaches, it's heart work. I'm sorry, Dr. Ellis can't spell. HEART. It is heart work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and when we as communicators, practitioners, coaches, consultants, etc., practitioners, when we understand that, because during, we mentioned earlier, like at the height of George Floyd, so many people wanted to run and get their certification or some kind of training and certificate to be able to practice DEI. And I'm not shading any of that. But it takes time to be able to do this work like healthily and effectively,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I have even learned that, having started in 2015 at a different iteration where it wasn't a lot of, well, look, there was some high tension around race around that time, but not as much as we see now, right? So I think the discovery means, because we know that this is hard work and it's going to take time and it takes effort and it takes money and it takes commitment, um, it means that not only do the practitioners need to continue to be in discovery of what we believe and know will work, but also every human being that is willing to participate in the process has to peel back their layers and do their own discovery. And that is why even the coaching is critical that I'm doing with clients. Like, let's sit down and peel back some layers. Let's work through some of the challenges that you're having. Let's have some conversation around talk to me about where you want to go. What are the roadblocks and why it feels so difficult for you to get to where you want to go? So I just think, again, that's my little framework. The last one being discovery. That's the framework that I've kind of been playing with. And I think I'll do an article or
That's
something like
good.
that. I came up with this about 2 weeks ago. I thought I'd give you an exclusive.
Yeah, it's good. And as soon as you do publish it, we'll make sure to link it in the show notes so people can check it
Thank
out.
you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to ask you a question before we do our wrap up questions.
Sure.
When it comes to coaching
Mm-hmm.
to help people get from mediocre to excellence, and I
Yeah.
think what we can say, especially organizations do, that would be mediocre at best. As far as the effectiveness of the work and and helping people understand what DI actually is and what it isn't. And at worst it re-injures, it causes more harm for sure. So we
It
have
does.
to up level as communicators out of this mediocre, how everybody else is talking about DEI, into not only, and this is where the depth model comes in from my book, uniquely tied to our business in a very unique, tailored way. There's that part of it. But then there's an excellence that all communicators needs to rise up into and get out of the mediocre. This is how it's been. We've been talking about DEI and we're being challenged with this pushback and this feedback. That's how I see it, is like they're showing us where the holes are. Thank you. They're showing us how we can engage them into the work and invite them in the work. Thank you. They're showing us where we need to fix things and where they feel FOMO, fear of missing out. Okay, let's fix that. Let's bring them into the work. Not everyone's going to come into the work, but there's a movable middle that doesn't side with the Elon Musk progressives. They feel that's not their space, but also, kind of the Elon Musk kind of stuff is not their space either. There's a group of people, I bet larger than we really understand, within our workplaces that don't feel like they have a place to go, that there isn't a safe place for them. And so communicators can actually engage that group by identifying them, and through the way that we are communicating about DEI in a way that meets their needs. And I think that when you are talking about getting people from mediocre to excellence, there's talk to us about what does that look like for communicators to get out of the mediocre version of talking about DEI and getting into this place of excellence.
I love it. I love that question, and thank you. As I think about everything I do, whether it's executive coaching, um, anything connected, of course, to D&I, being a content creator and writing books and things of that nature, podcasts, I desire to influence the influential, whether it's a student, a CEO of Fortune 50, you name it, right? My desire is to influence the influential. And so as I use that as my anchor, I put excellence at the front of that, right? I use excellence to anchor like my intention, my purpose in who I am serving.
Mm.
And so it means that word and that standard, I have to have a measure of it in everything that I do. And I want to call whoever I'm working with, I want to call them up to the standard.
Mm-hmm.
But what has to happen, Kim, is they have to want it too.
Ah, yeah. I hear you on that.
So it
I want
means
it more than they do. I want it.
yeah,
That's a challenge as the coaching, as the coach, right? It's like I fall into that pit a lot. Yeah.
I want to call you up to the standard of excellence, because I always say my podcast, other stuff that I write and do as a content creator, where I really lean in my excellence piece, or like if I'm writing a curriculum, I have a curriculum and I'm doing some coaching or whatever, I always say, excellence isn't perfection, it's progress.
There we go.
It just means, it just means that I'm giving my best in everything, and my best could be at a 2 today, it could be at a 10 tomorrow, but it means that I am using everything that I have to make whatever space I'm playing in better at that particular moment, right? And that if I am the enemy of my excellence, the enemy of your excellence is mediocrity. And a lot of times as communicators, it's humankind, we get stuck in that cycle of mediocrity. And so I think what happens is that you got to we're recording this in 2024. Of course, this will have a long, beautiful shelf life, but you got to be adaptable. You got to be resilient. You've got to be relentless, because it's easy to give up when you think you have a lot that you're bumping up against. I remember I was working with one of our largest clients in 2020, actually. It was a client a multinational company, and they needed us because they didn't have anything DEI, right? And so we were their external DEI unit for them, right? George Floyd, I think, happened in May, I believe it was, of 2020. They brought us on in July. Yeah.
Okay.
They brought us on in July 2020. And we're like for like 18 months, we were there in their external DEI unit, and then ultimately got them ready for them to bring in their inaugural chief of CDO, Chief Diversity Officer. Great. And we were doing focus groups with the client, and we had a focus group with a segment of their Black employees. And at the end of every focus group, we would ask, what does success look like for you? Or what would the success look like to you? And one of the Black executives said, I don't think we know what success looks like. We need you to tell us what success looks like. And I challenge the communicators who are listening to this to know that you understand this. You're in this space of communication. Your consumer doesn't always know what they're looking for. Sometimes you have to tell them, right? And so it means that as you up level to the excellence, you can't play in that space of mediocrity. You got to be adaptable. You got to be resilient. You got to be relentless. You got to be looking for opportunities to evolve. You got to be honing your craft, going to every workshop that Kim hosts and leads. You got to be listening and paying attention, because this work is it. I remember, Kim, early on, I mean, it's been, a while for me, but I remember coming into the industry of PR, and a lot of stuff was just cookie cutter because it was so easy.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Right.
That's not where we are. And guess what? We ain't going back.
Right. Right.
So
There's only
we
forward. Mm-hmm.
it's only forward. So we've got to, as you say, we've got to communicate, like we give a damn. Like, and it means with empathy. It means with authenticity. It means with this genuine desire to connect with people and to see our organizations evolve. I always say this, and I know we're wrapping up. I always say this: organizations are made of people and people are human. And if we try to treat people like anything other than human, that's what we bump up against. If we try to treat people like a number, like just a cog in the machine, or a cog in the wheel, a spoke in the wheel, uh just like a peg in the wall, we're gonna miss it. Communicators got to get down. I tell this to my students when we talk about excellence. I don't care if your answer is right. I'm not looking for the right answer. I'm looking for the best answer. So if you are okay with being mediocre, you just want to get it right. But if you want to do this with excellence, you got to make the best answer. You got to get the best approach. You got to get the best strategy. You got to get the best messaging, right? So, yeah. Or else, if I don't stop now, I will just keep talking.
I just like I just put myself in the shoes of someone that would be coached by you, and it's just like, I'm fired up. Let's go, Ariel. Let's go. Let's do this. Oh, you're so good. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you for
you.
sharing that. That was, and you even folded in that question I ask everybody is, what does it sound like to communicate like you give a damn? You were talking about empathy. Is there anything else you
Yeah.
want to add to that?
Yeah, I will. And this may sound, I don't know, but at this stage of where we are in the industry, communication, at this stage of where we are with leadership and with organizations, it's volatile. It's the VUCA state, right? I often use in my coaching talking about the VUCA framework.
Yeah, can you talk about what that stands for,
Yes,
just in case people don't know what it is?
yes, absolutely. Look this up. It's the acronym is stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And of course, acronym for short, VUCA. I can't remember the gentleman who just established it right now, but I believe it was coined as a business term in the 80s, 90s, if I'm not mistaken. But I spent a lot of time with it, with the framework and incorporating those concepts into my coaching and training and applying it to some of the DEI and comms work that I've done. And things are, they're vulnerable, they're uncertain, they're complex, and they're ambiguous. But even still, you you as an individual have a decision to make. You have to feed your family. You have to hopefully enjoy the work that you do and feel a sense of gratification and fulfillment in doing it.
Mhm.
But when it's all said and done, the priority of your legacy should be on impact. And if you are in an organizational culture that doesn't allow you to do that, you should second guess that. If you're in an organization where you were hopeful that you were going to be able to do that, then maybe it's okay to pivot and make some other decisions. And the reason I'm saying this, Kim, is because people aren't just working just to work anymore. And I know people have jobs, but you want fulfillment in what you're doing. You want impact. And again, I know people have to feed their families to put food on the table, but I want to really challenge folks to think broader about what that looks like for your legacy. When you leave this earth, right? What do you want the people to say? Not just about who you were as a person, but like how you showed up, how you gave your gifts to the world, how you contributed your talents to whatever organization that gave you a paycheck every Friday. You know what I mean? Like, what do you want people to, because listen, when you do leave, they're gonna post that job. It's not gonna take long. They're gonna send a flower to the funeral home, and the company keeps moving. But your legacy lasts forever. So I would challenge communicators to do the work that you love and really focus on impact, driving positive change, because that is your legacy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I think I needed to hear that. And I think communicators in general needed to hear that. You know, I because we need to remember who we are and the role that we have, and that this is good work, and it's no accident that we are in the roles that we are in this time in history. It just means that we have it, but we need help. So how can people continue to learn more from you and follow you and learn more about when the book comes out, et cetera, and if they're interested in coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to arielellis.com. That's AERIALELLIS.com, and you can book a call with me through my website. I'm also I love LinkedIn, so I welcome any LinkedIn connections, especially if you want to tag that you heard this podcast episode, and that you're a follower of Kim. But any and everything that as far as my book, podcast, coaching, consulting, all of that is right there on my website, and you can reach me directly there.
And please do, everybody, make yourself available to what she shares and how she can support you be the best damn communicator you can be and build that legacy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So, what popped out to you from the conversation? The more conscious communicators in the world, the better the world. So go to communicatelikeyougiveadampodcast.com and set up a one-on-one strategy session. And until next time, let's keep taking care of each other.